Ox rejected by owner until a lonely old man sees a hidden secret. Walter Thompson watched from a distance as farmer Richard Dawson forcefully pushed the skinny ox out of the corral. The shouts echoed across the dry pasture of Clear Springs, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, where everyone knew each other and gossip spread faster than the wind. The animal staggered when pushed, its large, sad eyes seeming to understand exactly what was happening. Richard yelled that the ox wasn't even worth the hay it ate, that it was dead weight on his prosperous farm. Walter felt a pang in his chest as he watched the scene. "Get out of here, you useless thing! You're nothing but a loss to me," Richard shouted, hitting the animal with a stick. "Should have sent you to the slaughterhouse long ago." The ox lowered its head, as if understanding every cruel word. Walter, who lived alone on a small farm along the road connecting Clear Springs to the neighboring town, couldn't just stand by. At 72, he had seen plenty of suffering in his life, but something about this animal moved him differently. "Richard," Walter called, slowly approaching. "What are you going to do with him?" "Walter?" Richard turned, surprised. "Oh, this one? I'm getting rid of him. He's no good. Eats too much, produces too little, just a waste." Walter looked at the ox, now standing near the fence, breathing heavily. There was something in the animal's eyes that unsettled him. A deep sadness, but also something more. It was as if those eyes wanted to tell a story. "Can I take him?" Walter asked, surprising himself. Richard laughed loudly, catching the attention of some ranch hands working nearby. "You want this dead weight? Walter, no offense, but you're too old to be raising cattle, and this one's nothing but trouble. He'll just eat into your retirement." "Even so, I'd like to keep him." "Well, if that's how it is." Richard scratched his chin, thoughtful. "But you'll have to pay something. Can't just give him away, let's say $200, just to make it official." Walter knew $200 was a lot for his modest retirement, but something inside him insisted he had to save this animal. Maybe it was loneliness speaking louder, or maybe just the compassion he'd always carried in his heart. "All right," he agreed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. An hour later, Walter walked down the dusty road, leading the ox by a rope. The animal followed meekly, as if knowing its life had changed for the better. Walter's farm was simple: a 3-room house, a small fenced pasture, and a corral that hadn't held animals in over 5 years, not since he'd sold his last cows. "Welcome to your new home," Walter murmured, opening the pasture gate. The ox stepped in slowly, sniffing the ground and looking around. It was then that Walter noticed something odd. On the animal's right side, near its neck, was an old mark that looked like it had been made with a branding iron. It wasn't a typical farm brand. It looked more like a symbol, almost like a poorly made dollar sign. "What a strange mark," he muttered to himself. That night, Walter prepared fresh hay for the ox and spent some time watching it eat. There was a calm in the air he hadn't felt in years. The loneliness that had clung to him since his wife Margaret passed away 15 years ago seemed a little lighter with the animal's presence. The next morning, Walter woke early as usual and went to check on the ox. To his surprise, the animal was standing right at the fence as if waiting for him. When Walter approached, the ox did something unusual. It pressed its muzzle into the palm of his hand, like a gesture of affection. "You seem to know me, don't you?" said Walter, stroking the animal's head. Just then, Dorothy, his closest neighbor and the town's unofficial gossip hub, appeared at the fence with her usual nosy demeanor. "Mr. Walter, I heard you bought Richard's rejected ox. Everyone's talking about it in town." "And what are they saying, Dorothy?" "Oh, you know how people are. If they say you're wasting money on a sick animal. Richard's been spreading that this ox has something wrong with its head, that it won't gain weight because of it." Walter sighed. He knew how small-town gossip worked. A lie told in the morning became absolute truth by evening. "He seems healthy to me," he replied simply. "Listen, I don't mean to meddle, but Richard got a little worked up after he heard you took the animal, said he might regret selling it." This puzzled Walter. Why would Richard regret selling an animal he himself called useless? In the following days, Walter settled into a routine with the ox, which he decided to name Thunder, because of the loud sound it made when it bellowed. The animal proved intelligent and gentle, following Walter around the farm like a loyal dog. It was during one of these walks that something extraordinary happened. Thunder suddenly stopped near an old tree at the back of the pasture, sniffed the ground, and then began digging with its front hooves. The behavior was so odd that Walter decided to investigate. "What did you find there, Thunder?" Walter grabbed an old hoe and started digging where the ox had indicated. About 20 inches down, the tool hit something hard. It was a rusted metal box, about the size of a shoebox. With hands trembling from curiosity and apprehension, Walter opened the box. Inside were old photographs protected by plastic, some yellowed with age. When he looked at the first photo, his heart nearly stopped. The image showed a boy around 10 years old, standing beside a calf. The boy was his son Anthony, whom he hadn't seen in over 20 years. And the calf had the exact same strange marking Thunder bore. "My God, it can't be," he whispered, his hands shaking. The other photo showed more moments from Anthony's childhood, with the same animal at different ages. There was also a photo of Walter himself, much younger, standing beside the now grown ox and his father, Samuel Thompson. Walter sat on the ground, stunned. How was this possible? That ox had to be over 20 years old. The last photo in the sequence showed the day he'd been forced to sell all the family's livestock to pay off debts right after his father's passing. Anthony had only been 12 and had cried bitterly the day Thunder was taken away. "Thunder, are you really Thunder?" he asked the animal, who watched him with those intelligent eyes. The ox stepped closer and again pressed its muzzle into his hand as if confirming the question. That night, Walter couldn't sleep. Memories flooded back. Anthony had always had a special bond with Thunder. The boy would spend hours talking to the animal, sharing his secrets and troubles. When they'd had to sell the cattle, Anthony had been devastated. His son left home at 18, saying he couldn't stand farm life anymore after all they'd lost. He'd promised to return when he was doing better, but the years passed and Walter never heard from him again. Margaret had suffered so much after their son left that she fell ill and passed away 5 years later. The next morning, Walter went into town to speak with Dr. Michael, the local vet. He needed to confirm his suspicions about Thunder's age. "Mr. Walter, how good to see you here. I heard you adopted Richard's ox." "Dr. Michael, I need you to examine him. I want to know the exact age." The vet agreed and went with Walter to the farm. After a careful examination, Dr. Michael confirmed what Walter already knew in his heart. This animal is between 22 and 25 years old. That's quite advanced for a bovine. Most don't live past 15. And does he seem healthy? Surprisingly, yes, a bit thin but strong. Must have had special care his whole life. As they talked, Richard Dawson appeared unexpectedly, holding 2 papers. "Mr. Walter, I came because I realized I made a mistake. This ox is actually still mine. Here are the documents to prove it." Walter looked at the papers. They were sales documents that seemed official, but something was off. The dates didn't match, and the previous owner's signature looked forced. "Richard, you said yourself you wanted to get rid of him, sold him to me for $200. I know, but I was wrong. I'll give your money back, and even pay another $200 for the trouble." Richard's insistence made Walter even more suspicious. Why would a man who called the animal deadweight now want him back so badly? "I'm not interested in selling," Walter said firmly. Richard's face turned red with anger. "Listen here, old man. Don't be stubborn. You can't take care of this animal, and I have papers proving he's mine. And I have witnesses who saw you sell him to me." Dr. Michael, who had been silently observing, stepped in. "Richard, you sold the animal publicly. Plenty of people saw it. If there's a legal dispute, let the courts handle it." Richard stormed off, but before leaving, he shouted a threat. "This isn't over, Walter. You'll regret this." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. That afternoon, Walter decided to visit Melissa Dawson, Richard's wife. She was known in town as a kind but submissive woman under her domineering husband's thumb. Maybe she knew something about Richard's sudden interest in the ox. Melissa was tending to the garden when Walter arrived. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "Mr. Walter, you shouldn't have come here." Richard was furious when he got home. "Melissa, I need to understand something. Why does your husband want this ox back so badly? He called it useless himself." Melissa hesitated, her hands shaking as she watered the plants. I can't say much, but I'll give you some advice. Look into the animal's past. There are things Richard never told anyone." "What kind of things?" "He bought that ox about 15 years ago from a man desperate for money. Said it was the best deal he ever made, but never explained why. Lately he's been on edge, especially since he found out you have the animal. Melissa, if you know something important, please tell me. That ox might have a connection to my family." Melissa looked Walter in the eyes for the first time. "Then maybe you should talk to Mrs. Nancy, the one who worked at the county clerk's office. She remembers everything that happens in this town. And try Mr. Joseph, who used to own the old transport company. He's the one who moved several animals out of here years ago." Walter thanked her and left, feeling he was on the right path to uncovering the truth. Mrs. Nancy, the retired county clerk, was at home sorting old papers when Walter came to see her. At 75 years old, she had an impressive memory and knew every business that had ever passed through the notary's office. "Mr. Walter, what a surprise. Come in, come in. Would you like some coffee?" After accepting the coffee and explaining the reason for his visit, Mrs. Nancy grew thoughtful for a few minutes. "Now that you mention it, I do remember. About 15 years ago, right after you lost your land, Richard came here with cattle purchase documents. I thought it was odd because he usually bought young animals, but this time they were all older ones. Do you remember who he bought them from?" "From several small farmers in the area who were struggling. Your father, the late Samuel, was one of them. I remember Richard paid very little for the animals, taking advantage of people's desperation. Do you have any records of those transactions?" "Yes, I do. I keep copies of everything. Let me look." Mrs. Nancy went to an old file cabinet and returned with a yellowed folder. "Here it is. Richard bought 5 head of cattle from your father, including a breeding bull named Thunder. The price was well below market value." Walter felt his heart race. Here was the official proof that Thunder had truly belonged to his family. "Mrs. Nancy, could I get a copy of this?" "Of course, my boy. And let me give you some advice. Keep this paper safe. You might need it." Next, Walter sought out Joseph, the former owner of the transport company. The 68-year-old man was fixing a fence in his backyard when Walter arrived. "Mr. Joseph, I came to talk about some cattle transports you did many years ago." "Son, I've transported so much cattle in my life. What exactly are you referring to?" Walter told him about Thunder and the circumstances of his family's forced sale of the animals. "Oh yes, I remember that day very well," Joseph said, stopping his work. "It was one of the worst transports I ever did." "Why?" "Because the animals were clearly attached to their owners, especially one bull that wouldn't stop bellowing and looking back. When we got to Richard's farm, the animal flat out refused to leave the truck. We had to force him. And then? Richard was very pleased, especially with that bull, said he'd made the deal of a lifetime. At the time I didn't understand, but now, thinking about it, I think he knew something we didn't." "What kind of thing?" "Well, this is just my suspicion, but I think that bull has something special about him. Richard isn't the type to hold on to unproductive animals. If he kept that animal for 15 years, it's because he's worth more than he seems." Walter returned home with more questions than answers. That night, he watched Thunder in the pasture, trying to understand what made that animal so special in Richard's eyes. Then he noticed something curious. Thunder didn't graze randomly like other cattle. He followed a specific pattern, always visiting the same spots in the pasture in a certain order. It was as if he were following a mental map. Intrigued, Walter decided to follow the animal the next morning. Thunder started grazing near the entrance of the farm, then headed to the tree where they had found the photos. Next went to a specific corner near the back fence, and finally stopped in front of a pile of rocks Walter had always assumed was just a natural accumulation. "What are you trying to show me, Thunder?" The bull looked at Walter, and then at the rocks, bellowing softly. It was as if he were asking him to investigate that spot. With growing curiosity, Walter began removing the rocks. They weren't loose as he'd thought, but a deliberate stack hiding something underneath. After moving several rocks, he found a concrete slab with a metal ring. "What is this?" he murmured, pulling the ring. The slab shifted, revealing a small underground chamber like a natural vault. Inside was a bundle wrapped in plastic tarp. When he opened it, Walter nearly fainted from shock. There were old family documents, including the original deed to the land that had belonged to his father, Samuel. But there was more. An unregistered will where Samuel left the land to Walter, with the specific condition that Thunder would always be cared for by the family. "Daddy, you knew this might happen," Walter whispered, tears in his eyes. The will explained that Samuel had hidden the documents when he learned he'd be forced to sell everything. He instructed that if Thunder ever returned to the family, it would be the sign to reclaim the stolen land. But there was another surprise in the bundle. A sealed envelope with Anthony written in Samuel's shaky handwriting. Inside was a letter explaining where to find the family's true treasure. With trembling hands, Walter read the letter. Samuel explained that he had discovered a small gold vein on the property years before being forced to sell. He kept it secret to protect the family, knowing that if Richard found out, he'd do anything to steal the land. The letter ended with a specific instruction. "The path to the gold is marked on Thunder's hide. Follow the mark like a map, and it will lead you to the right place." Walter rushed to Thunder and carefully examined the mark on the animal's hide. What had once looked like a poorly made dollar sign now revealed itself as a rudimentary map. The lines pointed to specific directions from known landmarks on the property. "Thunder, you really are special," Walter said, hugging the animal's neck. "You've kept our family's secrets all these years." That night, Walter barely slept. He held in his hands the chance to recover everything his family had lost, but he also knew he'd face Richard's fury, as the man surely suspected something. The next morning, Walter was surprised by a visit from a young journalist from the neighboring town. She introduced herself as Christine O'Brien and said she was working on a story about interesting local tales. "Mr. Thompson, I heard about your story with the rejected bull. I found it very touching. May I ask you a few questions?" Walter hesitated. He didn't want publicity right now, but something in the girl's sincerity made him agree. "Does this bull have a special meaning for you?" "It does. He belonged to my family when I was younger. It's like reuniting with the past." "How interesting. Do you have family?" "I have a son, Anthony, but we haven't spoken in over 20 years. Christine took notes carefully and asked to photograph Walter with Thunder. After some time talking, she asked an unexpected question. "Mr. Thompson, wouldn't you like to try to reconnect with your son? I have some contacts who might help. With his full name and a few details, we might be able to find him." The idea had crossed Walter's mind many times, but he was always afraid of rejection. What if Anthony didn't want to see him? What if he still held on to resentment from the hard times? "I don't know if he'd want to see me." Fathers and sons always have a chance to reconcile, and this story with the bull might be just what you need to reconnect. Walter finally agreed and gave all the details he remembered about Anthony. Christine promised to do some research and reach out if she found anything. 2 days later, Richard showed up at the farm again, but this time with a lawyer. "Mr. Thompson, I'm here one last time with a friendly offer. My client is willing to pay $5,000 for the animal." $5,000 was a considerable amount for Walter, but he knew Thunder was worth much more than money. The bull was the key to recovering everything his family had lost. "I'm not interested in selling. Listen, old man, you're being very stubborn. This animal still legally belongs to my client. If you don't accept our offer, we'll have to settle this in court." "Then settle it. I have documents proving Thunder belonged to my family long before you." The lawyer and Richard exchanged worried glances. It was clear they didn't expect Walter to have any documents. "What documents are these?" asked the lawyer. "You'll find out if you take this to court." After the two left, Walter decided it was time to take more decisive action. He went to Dr. Michael and asked him to examine Thunder again, this time documenting everything officially. "Doctor, I need a full report on this animal's age, health, and specific characteristics." "Of course, Mr. Thompson. May I ask why? I might need to prove a few things in court. The vet conducted a thorough examination and was impressed by his findings. Mr. Thompson, this animal shows signs of special care throughout its life. Someone invested a lot in him, and this mark on the hide isn't from an ordinary branding iron. It was done with a special technique that preserves the skin. It's a craftsman's work. And the age? I can confidently say he's between 22 and 24 years old. He's exceptional for that age. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. A week later, Christine called Walter with news that changed everything. Mr. Thompson, I've located your son. Walter's heart raced. Anthony Thompson, 42 years old, engineering graduate, lives in Pittsburgh and works for a construction company. He has a family, married with 2 children. He agreed to talk to me. I haven't contacted him directly yet. I wanted to speak with you first, but I can tell you he never forgot you. When I mentioned your story to someone who knows him, they said he still talks about his childhood on the farm and a bull named Thunder. Walter felt his eyes fill with tears. After so many years, there was still hope of reuniting with his son. Christine, can you tell him I found Thunder? That's exactly what I'll do. 2 days later, Walter's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when he answered, he heard a voice he recognized immediately, even after more than 20 years. Dad? Anthony. My son. Both fell silent for a few seconds, too emotional to speak. Dad, the journalist told me about Thunder. Is it really him? Yes, son, he came home. Like, Dad, I'm so sorry for leaving like that. I was so angry about everything that happened, the poverty, losing the land. No need to apologize, Anthony. You were just a boy trying to find your way. Dad, can I come visit? I really want to see Thunder again. And most of all, I want to see you. Of course, son, this is your home. Anthony said he'd travel the following weekend, bringing his wife, Linda, and their 2 children, Peter, 15, and Amy, 12. That week, Walter cleaned the house like he hadn't in years. He bought groceries, prepared the guest room, and even gave the pasture fence where Thunder lived a fresh coat of paint. The bull seemed to sense something special was about to happen. He grew more restless, as if he knew an important reunion was near. On Saturday morning, Walter heard a car pulling in. His heart raced. When he saw Anthony stepping out of the car, a grown man, well-dressed and athletic, the tears came uncontrollably. Dad! The embrace between the two lasted several minutes. Linda and the children watched, moved by the long-awaited reunion. Anthony, how you've grown, my son. Dad, you look the same, just a little more gray. Come, I want you all to meet Thunder. When they reached the pasture, Thunder stood near the fence as if waiting for them. The moment he saw Anthony, the steer ran toward the fence and began to bellow strangely, almost as if crying. My God! Thunder! Anthony reached out his hand, and the steer immediately pressed its muzzle against it. You remember me, don't you? Linda and the children were amazed by the scene. Peter, the eldest grandson, asked, Grandpa, does that steer really know Dad? Yes, he does, my boy. They were great friends in childhood. Anthony entered the pasture and spent several minutes petting Thunder, talking to him as he had in his youth. The animal seemed in heaven, wagging its tail and making soft, contented sounds. During lunch, Walter told the family the whole story, buying the rejected steer, discovering the photos, the hidden documents, and Richard's threat. Dad, are you saying Grandpa Samuel hid the land deed? Exactly. And there's more. Walter showed the letter Samuel had left and explained the clues about gold on the property. Anthony, your grandfather left all this for you, including instructions on how to find what he hid. But Dad, this is incredible. Does this mean we can reclaim the family land? We can, but it'll be a hard fight. Richard won't give up easily. Linda, who had stayed quiet, finally spoke. Walter, my husband is an engineer and I'm a lawyer. If you'd like, we can help resolve this legally. The revelation that his daughter-in-law was a lawyer brought Walter new hope. Finally, they'd have someone with legal knowledge on their side. "Linda, that would be wonderful. But I don't want you getting into trouble because of me." "It's not trouble, it's family," she replied with a smile. That afternoon, they decided to follow the map's clues from Thunder's brand. The steer seemed to understand what was happening and led them to specific spots on the property. Following the brand's lines, they reached a spot near the creek that ran through the farm. "It's here," Anthony said, comparing the location to the drawing on Thunder's hide. They began digging, and after an hour of work, they found quartz stones mixed with small gold nuggets. It wasn't a large amount, but it was enough to confirm Samuel had been right. "Grandpa was a wise man," said Amy, the granddaughter, holding a small golden nugget. "He was," Walter agreed. "He knew one day this would be needed to protect the family." That evening, as the family talked on the porch, they saw car headlights approaching. It was Richard, accompanied by his lawyer and two men who looked like hired muscle. "Mr. Thompson, last chance. Either you sell the steer or we handle this another way." Anthony stood and stepped in front of his father. "What other way would that be?" "And who are you?" Richard asked, intimidated by the younger, stronger man. "I'm Walter's son, and I warn you, any threats will be treated as a crime." Linda also stepped forward. "I'm the family's lawyer. Any attempt at intimidation will be reported to the authorities." Richard's lawyer pulled him aside and whispered in his ear. Clearly, they hadn't expected organized resistance. "This isn't over," Richard said before leaving. On Monday, Linda accompanied Walter to the county clerk's office to register all the recovered documents. Mrs. Nancy, a retired employee, was called as a witness due to her knowledge of the old business dealings in the area. "These documents are legitimate," confirmed Mrs. Nancy. "I remember when the late Samuel came here looking for information on how to protect his land." Linda checked all the paperwork and confirmed everything was in order to start a repossession process. "Walter, you have a very strong case. The will is valid, even though it wasn't registered at the time, because it's signed and has valid witnesses." Meanwhile, Richard wasn't idle. He spread word around town that Walter was trying to steal his land with fake documents. The small town soon split between those who supported the lonely old man and those who defended the wealthy farmer. Mrs. Dorothy, the gossipy neighbor, surprised everyone by taking Walter's side. "I always thought there was something odd about how Richard acquired so much land so quickly," she remarked in the town square. "And that story about the bull finding his way home is too beautiful to be a lie." Dr. Michael also publicly supported Walter, providing technical reports that proved Thunder's advanced age and the authenticity of his markings. Tension in the town grew when Richard tried to stop Walter and his family from continuing their excavations in search of gold. He claimed any mining activity on his property was illegal. "The land is still yours, Richard," Linda replied, "but not for long." The case gained attention when Christine published the full story about the reunion between father and son through the bull Thunder. The story touched many people and soon reached the ears of journalists from major outlets. A television station from Pittsburgh sent a crew to cover the case. The report showed Walter and Anthony together again, Thunder as the hero of the reunion, and the legal battle for the family's land. The uproar was so great that Melissa Dawson, Richard's wife, decided to break her silence. She sought out Walter in secret and made revelations that completely changed the course of the situation. "Mr. Walter, I can't keep this secret any longer. My husband forced me to lie all these years." "What kind of lie, Melissa?" "He didn't buy that land legally. He forged documents and took advantage of families in debt. I've kept proof of everything because I was always afraid I'd need to defend myself someday." Melissa handed Linda a box of documents showing Richard's illegal practices. There were fake contracts, forged signatures, and even records of bribes to public officials. "Why are you doing this now?" Linda asked. "Because I'm tired of living with a man who built his wealth on lies and theft, and because the story of the bull coming home made me believe there's still justice in the world." With the new evidence, Linda had enough material not only to recover the Thompson family's land, but also to sue Richard for multiple crimes. The case made national headlines when it was discovered Richard had used similar schemes against dozens of rural families in the region. Many who had lost their land in past decades came forward with their own stories. Thunder became a symbol of hope and justice. People from other towns visited Walter's farm just to meet the bull who helped expose one of the biggest land-grabbing schemes in the area. During the 3-month legal process, the Thompson family remained united on the farm. Anthony took leave from work to help his father, and Linda coordinated the entire legal defense. Peter and Amy, the grandchildren, developed a special bond with Thunder. They spent hours in the pasture, listening to their grandfather's stories about their father's childhood and the family's hard times. "Grandpa, is thunder really magical?" Amy would ask. "It's not magic, my dear. It's love. The love animals have for their family is so strong they can overcome any distance and any time." The final hearing took place on a sunny Tuesday. The prosecutor, based on the evidence presented by Linda and the proof provided by Melissa, demanded not only the return of the land, but also Richard's arrest for document forgery and fraud. Walter, Anthony, and the entire family were present in court when the judge read the verdict. Considering all the evidence presented, and especially the authentic will of Samuel Thompson, I declare that the land in question must be immediately returned to the Thompson family. Furthermore, I sentence Richard Dawson to 5 years of semi-open imprisonment and order him to pay compensation for moral and material damages. The courtroom erupted in applause. Walter wept as he hadn't in years, embracing his son and grandchildren. When they returned home, Thunder was waiting for them at the farm gate, as he always did. But this time, there was something different in his eyes, a peace, as if he knew his mission was complete. "Thank you, Thunder," Walter said, stroking the animal's muzzle. "You brought my family back and restored our dignity." In the following months, the family worked together to rebuild the farm. Anthony used his engineering knowledge to modernize the property, while Linda handled the legal aspects of the controlled gold mining. The small nuggets found in the creek yielded enough to pay off all their old debts and invest in modernizing the farm. They created a rural tourism project where visitors could learn about Thunder's story and experience life in the countryside. Melissa Dawson divorced Richard and moved to another town, where she started over. Before leaving, she made sure to say goodbye to Walter. "Thank you for giving me the courage to do the right thing," she said. "Thank you for helping us find justice," Walter replied. The Thompson family farm became a local attraction. Schools brought children to meet Thunder and hear the story of how a rejected ox became the hero who reunited a family and brought justice to many. Thunder, despite his old age, remained strong and healthy. He seemed to understand his importance and greeted visitors patiently, letting children pet him and take pictures beside him. "Dad, don't you think Thunder deserves a companion?" Anthony suggested one day. "You're right. He spent so many years alone." They bought a gentle cow to keep Thunder company. The old ox welcomed his new friend with joy, and soon the two grazed together across the farm. Peter, the eldest grandson, decided he wanted to study veterinary medicine after spending time with Thunder. Amy chose law, inspired by her mother and the family's fight for justice. "Grandpa, when I graduate, I'll help other families who've gone through what you did," Amy said. "That makes me very proud, my dear." Thunder's story was documented in a book written by Christine, the journalist who helped reunite the family. The book became a regional success, and all proceeds were donated to a fund supporting struggling small farmers. 2 years after the trial, Walter received an unexpected visitor. An 80-year-old man introduced himself as Charles Miller, a retired veterinarian who had cared for Thunder in his early years. "I read about your story in the paper and came to confirm something I've always suspected," Charles said. "This ox is no ordinary animal. During the years I cared for him, I noticed he had above-average intelligence and sensitivity. Do you think he always knew he'd return home?" "I'm certain of it. Some animals have a special bond with their human families. Thunder is one of those rare cases." Charles told me that during the years Thunder lived on Richard's farm, the animal always showed sadness and longing. He would often gaze in the direction of the old Thompson family homestead. Richard hired me to care for him because he knew Thunder was special. He was always afraid someone would discover the secrets Thunder held. What secrets do you think Richard knew? He knew about the emotional connection between the ox and your family, and he suspected there was something valuable on the land that belonged to your father. That's why he kept Thunder alive all these years, even when the animal was no longer productive. Charles's revelation confirmed what the family had long suspected. Richard always knew Thunder was more than just livestock. The third anniversary of Anthony's return home was celebrated with a big party at the homestead. Friends from all over the region came to celebrate the family's reunion and the triumph of justice. Thunder, now 25, remained the star of every gathering. His white beard and slower movements only added to his dignity and charm. During the party, Walter gave a heartfelt speech. 3 years ago, I was a lonely man who had given up on justice and the hope of reuniting my family. Today, I'm surrounded by my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren, and the animal who made it all possible. Thunder taught us that true love endures time and distance. Applause echoed across the homestead, and Thunder, as if understanding they were talking about him, let out a soft moo in response. That night, after all the guests had left, the family gathered on the porch to gaze at the starry sky. Thunder grazed peacefully in the pasture, bathed in the light of the full moon. "Dad, have you ever thought of writing a book about all this?" Anthony asked. "Actually, I've been writing a few things. Family memories, stories I want to leave for the grandchildren. It would be important for others to know the full story." "Maybe. But the most important thing has already happened. Our family is together again." Linda, watching Thunder from the yard, remarked, "It's amazing how he seems to understand everything happening around him." "Animals sense things we can't explain," said Walter. Thunder knew he had a mission to fulfill. Peter, nearly asleep in his grandfather's lap, murmured, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I'll take care of Thunder too." "I'm sure you will, my boy." The following months brought even more joy to the family. Anthony got a job at an engineering firm in a nearby town, allowing him to keep living at the homestead with his family. Linda opened a law office in town, specializing in rural law and helping small farmers. The homestead's agritourism grew so much that they had to hire local workers to assist with visitors. This provided income for many families in the area, fulfilling Walter's dream of helping his community. Thunder remained the main attraction, but now shared attention with other animals added to the property: chickens, ducks, goats, and even an old horse rescued from mistreatment. "We're turning this into a sanctuary for old animals," Anthony joked. "And there's nothing wrong with that," Walter replied. "They deserve to spend their final years with dignity." Thunder's story inspired other families in the region to dig through old documents and question suspicious land deals. Several other irregularities by Richard were uncovered, helping more families reclaim their properties. The former farmer, serving his sentence under semi-open conditions, worked on a rural rehabilitation project. Ironically, he was learning to care for animals respectfully, something he had never done in his life. Melissa, who had moved to the capital, occasionally sent letters to Walter, sharing updates about her new life and thanking the Thompson family for the courage they gave her to start over. In one of those letters, she wrote, "I found work at an organization that helps women who are victims of domestic violence. Every time I see a woman finding the strength to change her life, I remember the courage you all gave me." The 4th year after the reunion brought news that filled Walter's heart with joy. Linda was pregnant. The first great-grandchild was on the way. "Thunder will meet another generation of the family," Walter said, moved. "And this child will grow up hearing the stories of the bull that brought the family together," Anthony added. During Linda's pregnancy, Thunder displayed unusually protective behavior. Whenever she approached the pasture, the bull would come to the fence and stay close to her, as if sensing she carried new life. "He knows you're pregnant," observed Amy, her granddaughter. "Animals sense these things." "It's true," Linda agreed. "He's calmer when I'm around." The baby was born on a spring morning when the golden oak blossoms filled the farm with vibrant colors. It was a boy, named Samuel, in honor of the great-grandfather who had protected the family's future with his wisdom. When they brought the baby home, Thunder was waiting at the gate, as if aware something important had happened. Upon seeing the newborn, The old bull let out a soft moo, a sound that seemed like a blessing. "Welcome to the family, Samuel," Walter said, cradling his great-grandson. "This is Thunder, the guardian of our story." Little Samuel's growth brought even more life to the farm. Thunder, despite his age, seemed to grow younger in the child's presence. When the baby began to crawl, one of his favorite activities was going to the pasture fence, where Thunder waited patiently. "It's amazing how they connected from the very first meeting," Linda remarked. "It's the circle of life coming full circle," Walter replied, with the wisdom of his 77 years. Visitors to the farm now witnessed 4 generations of the Thompson family living in harmony, all united by the story of the bull who was once rejected but became a symbol of perseverance and family love. One sunny afternoon, as Walter watched Thunder grazing peacefully beside his cow companion, he reflected on everything that had happened. From a lonely, hopeless man, he had become the patriarch of a close-knit, thriving family. Anthony approached and sat beside his father on the porch. "Dad, sometimes I have trouble believing all this really happened." "That's life, son. It has a mysterious way of setting things right when we least expect it." "Do you think Grandpa Samuel planned all this when he hid the documents?" "I think he had faith that one day the truth would come out, and Thunder was the instrument he chose to protect that truth." That night, Walter wrote in his journal, "Today marks 5 years since Thunder came home. 5 years of joy, discoveries, and reunions. If anyone had told me a rejected bull would completely change my life, I wouldn't have believed it. But life teaches us that miracles often come disguised as small acts of compassion. When I decided to save Thunder from rejection, it was actually he who saved me from loneliness and despair." The story of the Thompson family and Thunder continued to inspire people across the region. Documentaries were made, articles published, and even a play was created by students at the local university, recounting the saga of the ox who guarded a family's secrets. Thunder, now 26 years old, remained the heart of the farm. Though his movements were slower and he needed special care, his presence still radiated the same wisdom and calm that had won Walter Thompson's heart on that first day. "He's getting old, isn't he?" asked Peter, now 18 and about to start veterinary school. "Yes, he is," Walter replied, "but he's aging with dignity, surrounded by love. Grandpa, when the time comes, he'll leave knowing he fulfilled his mission. He brought our family together, brought justice to many people, and taught all of us about the importance of love and perseverance." Amy, now 15 and determined to study law like her mother, added, "And he left a legacy that will live on for generations in our family." Little Samuel, now 2 years old, ran around the yard babbling words that included Grandpa, his version of Thunder, and excitedly pointed to the pasture every time he saw the ox. "He'll grow up thinking having a 100-year-old ox in the family is the most normal thing in the world," Linda laughed. "And maybe it is," Walter said. "In our family, the extraordinary has become ordinary." The farm still welcomed visitors interested in their story, but the family always balanced sharing their experience with preserving their privacy. Certain areas were reserved just for them, ensuring Thunder and the other animals had peaceful spaces to rest. One evening, as Walter stroked Thunder at dusk, the ox did something he had never done before. He lay down on the ground and rested his head in Walter's lap. It was a gesture of complete trust from an animal who knew he was safe and loved. "Thank you, Thunder," Walter whispered. "Thank you for everything you've done for our family." The ox looked at him with those wise, deep eyes, and Walter was certain that somehow Thunder understood every word. That night, gathered on the porch for dinner, the family talked about their future plans. Peter was preparing for college, Amy studying for entrance exams, Anthony was planning to expand their rural tourism project, and Linda considered writing a book on rural law inspired by their family's experience. "You know what makes me proudest?" Walter said, watching his descendants. "It's that our family has learned true wealth isn't in the gold we found, but in the bonds that hold us together. And in the love we give to those who need us," Anthony added, glancing toward the pasture where Thunder rested. "Like that rejected ox who once showed up at our gate," Linda finished. Little Samuel, not fully understanding the conversation, but sensing the emotion in the air, pointed to the pasture and shouted, "Grandpa! Grandpa!" Everyone laughed, and Walter lifted his great-grandson into his lap. "That's right, my boy. Grandpa Thunder is part of our family, and he always will be." As the stars began to appear in the sky, the Thompson family settled in for another peaceful night on the farm they had nearly lost and reclaimed, thanks to the loyalty of a special ox. Thunder, in his pasture, lifted his head toward the house and let out a soft moo, as if saying goodnight to the family he loved and had spent his whole life protecting. And so, under the starry sky of Clear Springs, the story of the rejected ox who became the guardian of a family continued to be written day after day, with love, gratitude, and the certainty that true miracles happen when we open our hearts to those in need. The end of the story. So, what did you think of this touching story of Thunder and the Thompson family? Do you believe animals can have such a deep connection with their human families? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.